Es mejor emprender o trabajar para alguien más. Esto es mi diario de Inglés Británico, con Shandon, profesor nativo de Inglés Británico. Un podcast para hispanohablantes que quieren progresar profesionalmente en el Reino Unido. Vale, empecemos. Welcome to episode 29 of the podcast. I hope you're well, and I hope you're ready to improve your English. Today, I'm going to be looking at an important comparison and an important question. A question that is a tough decision for lots of different people. And that question is, should I start my own company and be an entrepreneur? Or should I get a job and work for somebody else as an employee? This is not an easy decision for lots of people. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of both. I'll also tell you some lessons that I've learned since I've done both. I've worked as an employee and as an entrepreneur, working by and for myself. And then I'll also explain why I decided to work for myself and start my own business. So to kick things off, almost everyone has to work, of course. We usually spend at least half of our waking hours working. If we're awake for 16 hours and we work for 8 hours, that's half of our waking hours, half of the time that we're awake. Which means that work is a key part of our lives, whether we enjoy it or not. And there are two main paths that we can follow with work. You can either work for somebody else or you can work for yourself. If you work for somebody else, that means you're an employee. If you work for yourself, that means you're an entrepreneur. So today, as I said, I'm going to look at the pros and cons of both of those paths, either being an employee or being an entrepreneur. So first of all, let's look at the path of being an entrepreneur. I'll start with the pros of being an entrepreneur. The first pro is that you have complete control of decisions. When you're an entrepreneur, you own the business, whether you work by yourself or you also employ other people to work for you as well. But you have complete control of all decisions. You decide everything that happens in your business, especially, of course, at the start when you work completely alone. What does this mean? This means that you can create exactly what you want, the exact product or service that you want, to help the very specific people that you want to. That's completely your decision. So that's the first pro of entrepreneurship. The second is that you have complete control of your own time. You decide when you want to work. Nobody decides it for you. Nobody says you have to work from 9 till 5. You decide when you want to work. If you want to go somewhere during the day, you can do that. If one day you don't want to work, you can do that as well. The third pro of entrepreneurship is that you have a higher chance of earning lots of money. If you have a job, you're limited by your salary. If you're an entrepreneur, the sky's the limit. Think of the richest people in the world. People like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, for example. They are able to be worth the amount they are because they were entrepreneurs. Let's look now at the cons of entrepreneurship. So we've looked at the pros. Let's look at the cons of entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur. First of all, you have less security and certainty. You have no regular pay and you have no guarantee of earning money. In a job, you have your salary, but as an entrepreneur, you have no guarantee of earning money. No company is paying you, so you may not earn money 1 month, or for many months, for example. The second con is that you have fewer workplace benefits. Nobody pays for equipment for you. If you need a new laptop, a new desk, any other equipment to do your job, you have to pay for that as an entrepreneur. If you're sick, for example, you don't get sick pay as an entrepreneur. When you work in a company, the company will pay you if you're sick. As an entrepreneur, this won't happen. And there are also other benefits as well, but that's a big con of entrepreneurship. You don't have those workplace benefits. The third con is that you have to do everything yourself, especially if you work alone as what's called a solopreneur. So as I mentioned, an entrepreneur is someone who starts their own business, but this could mean they have employees as well. A solopreneur is somebody who works by themselves and they start their own business, but it's just them working in the business. So as a solopreneur, as an entrepreneur who works by themselves, success is completely down to you. There's nobody else there working in the company to help you. You have to do everything. So that's entrepreneurship and the life of an entrepreneur. So now let's talk about being an employee and having a job. Let's look first at the pros of being an employee and having a job. Of course, the cons of being an entrepreneur are the pros of being an employee. For example, being an employee is more secure. It's very good if you don't like risk. As an employee, you get workplace benefits, and you also don't have to do everything yourself. Is there anything else? Any other pros to being an employee? First of all, I would say the social aspect of working in a job. Being an employee is often less lonely than being an entrepreneur. You work with other people on a daily basis. You have conversations and interactions with people every day. So this means it's less lonely and you have more of a social environment. Another pro of being an employee is that you have the opportunity to learn from others. As an entrepreneur working by yourself, you can learn online, but you have fewer opportunities to learn from others. Whereas in a company, as an employee, it's likely that you're going to work with other people who you can learn from on a daily basis. So those are the pros of being an employee. What about the cons of being an employee? Many of these cons are similar to the pros of entrepreneurship because, of course, often they are opposite paths. As an employee, you don't have as much control of decisions. The company decides things or your boss decides things, and you have to do what they say often. You also don't have control of your time. If they say that you need to be in the office between 9 and 5, or between 5 a.m. and midday, for example, those are the times that you have to be there. If you decide you just want to go for a long walk or go to the pub, as many English people do, or anything else during the workday, you can't do that as an employee. Well, you can do that, but you risk being fired. You risk losing your job. And of course, as an employee, you're limited by your salary. So you have less opportunity to earn large amounts of money. But of course, there are still people as employees that do earn large amounts of money. What other cons are there to being an employee? First of all, your progress is determined by your employers, the people who employ you. As an entrepreneur, you decide your future. It's based on the work that you do and the work that you put in and the effort you make. As an employee, your employers decide whether you get a promotion, whether you move forward in your career, and so on. Another con of being an employee is that you have to put up with things that you don't agree with. If your boss does something that you don't agree with, or another colleague does something that you don't like, for example, you have to put up with these things often, even though they frustrate you or you don't like them. So those are the cons of being an employee and working in a company. So which is better, being an employee or being an entrepreneur and starting your own company? There's no right answer. Based on the pros and cons I've just mentioned and other factors, other details, the right decision will be different for each person. So you have to decide which is the best path for you, based on your priorities, based on the type of person you are, and other factors. So why did I decide to be an entrepreneur? This company, Éxito English, is the second company I've started. I'm someone who has lots of ideas, and I like being able to create ideas and make them in the way that I think is best. I like to be able to create change in exactly the way I think would be best. This, of course, is a harder path. My opinion is that it's easier to be an employee, but I like the challenge. I really like the challenge every day of coming up with ideas, working hard, trying to create change. And if I'm successful, I can make a bigger change as an entrepreneur than I could make as an employee. And this really inspires me and made me want to work for myself. So there you have the pros and cons of entrepreneurship and being an employee. I hope you found that interesting and useful for improving your English. If you like the podcast and you listen on Spotify, make sure to give the podcast 5 stars to help other English learners find this podcast. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Gracias por escuchar mi diario de Inglés Británico. Si vives en el Reino Unido y sientes que tu inglés te está frenando profesionalmente, te invito a hacer una evaluación de fluidez gratuita conmigo. En esta sesión veo cómo hablas inglés ahora, identifico qué te está bloqueando y te explico qué necesitas trabajar para hablar con más claridad y confianza. No es una clase, es un diagnóstico claro de tu inglés hablado. Reserva tu evaluación ahora a través del link en la descripción del episodio. Gracias y nos vemos pronto. Bye.